First of all, I got to tell everybody, this is AM 580 KUBC. If you'd like to join the fray here, our number is 249-5800. 249-5800 gets you right in here, live on the air. David Justice, how you doing?
Good morning, Jim.
Good morning to you.
Is this fray or fringe?
Fringe?
You use the word fray.
Join the fray.
Is this a fringe fray or
a fringe fray?
Fringe.
F-R-I-N-G-E?
I don't know. You use the word
fray. F-R. I don't know. We're going to have Roger to look that up for us.
Roger, look that up.
I love it. Oh, by the way, Roger, if you're listening, Sally would like you to call her 245-2501. Again, that's 245-2501. Sally would like to talk to you about the thing I read last week, okay?
She probably needs a definition of a word.
Yeah. You know, he is, that guy, I love that guy. He is so cool. David, you had an envelope here last week that from another great guy.
Yeah, thank you.
Gary Nutter left. He calls it the grease. I think it's the grease fund or something. He calls it to grease the skids or something like that.
It greases them.
Yeah, to help out with your travel expenses.
That's great. Yeah, I really appreciate that a lot.
That's cool. So how you doing?
I'm good.
How you doing?
Can I address something that's Colorado Constitution, Article 5? It's the article that creates the legislative department. The people reserved to themselves the ability to write laws through the process of initiative, and you can amend the Constitution, or you can actually get a law, just like the legislature would put a law into place. And the second power is called the referendum. Now, I don't know if we're going to get there to nullify the gun control laws, because the referendum, according to the Constitution, may be ordered except as to laws necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and that is probably how these laws are going to come down, is through the public health and safety clause, which we wouldn't be able to use a referendum to get them overturned. So that might be a problem if we were looking down that road.
So obviously these people are looking at how they can keep these laws on the books then.
Well, yeah, the ones that are passing them through want, of course, to keep them, and the only way to challenge them would be to violate them, which would give you standing to challenge them as unconstitutional. So somewhere down the line, someone's going to have to break one to get the standing to challenge it. And this is what a lot of people need to understand. If you're complying with the law, you don't have standing to challenge it. It's called the Ashwander Doctrine. If one avails themselves to the benefits of a statute, or if one complies with the statute, you can't turn around and challenge the validity of it. If you break it, now you have standing to challenge it. So there's the power of nullification. And one individual can challenge an unconstitutional law. Of course, he looks like a heinous villain because he's defiantly standing against a law.
Does that sound familiar?
But that gives that individual the opportunity to raise an issue that he would otherwise not be able to raise.
Regardless of how these laws are put into the books, would a different House and a different Senate be able to come in and...
They would be able to, what do you call it? I can't find the word, but yeah, another House can come in and
strike these down or whatever.
There's a word for that. It'll hit me in a minute.
Okay.
But yeah, we can overturn, new legislatures can overturn bad laws.
Okay.
And that needs, I think that needs, we go in, we put new people in there. They need to do some serious house cleaning and get rid of some laws rather than making more laws.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but one of our previous state representatives here was telling me that each year they're required to come in with, I think it's 5 new laws.
I've heard that. I don't know if that's. I don't know by whose.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know by law or by.
Probably just a policy, because there's nothing in the Constitution that requires all legislators to come up with 5 new laws a year.
But I'm thinking now to be required to come in to get rid of 5 old laws. So
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we really need to clean up our own act.
Let's go back to last week. I want to finish what we were talking about last week. I want people to understand why you're doing what you're doing in certain situations.
Well, a lot of it goes to what I just said, and it was a lead-in as well, the standing. we need standing in order to challenge the validity of invalid laws. If we don't put ourselves into a position, and some would call it civil disobedience. It has the appearance of civil disobedience. It has the appearance to some of being rebellious. But we need to remind ourselves that this nation was founded in rebellion to tyranny. If an unjust law or an unconstitutional law is passed, it needs to be challenged. And rather than wait for some criminal to come along and stumble into it, or his lawyers trying to figure out a way to get him out of trouble, which is, where a lot of case law comes from, they'll raise these constitutional challenges during the course of proceedings. But typically it's a criminal action or a situation where they're trying to get this guy off. So the lawyers will use the standing to get their client out of trouble. If solid Americans break the law, they're going in there with a principled intent, an intent to exercise their power of nullification against a void law. And so we have to put ourselves in harm's way for that reason. And the founding fathers, they were the first ones to put themselves in harm's way. They indicted the King of England for his crimes against nature and the laws of nature and the Constitution of England. And that's what the whole Declaration of Independence was about, was a common law indictment. And so they exercised their power as free men. And that's, of course, how this nation came into being, on those principles of rebellion to tyranny is obedience to God. If we rebel against the laws of nature, we're going to suffer. And I absolutely know that in the laws of nature, there are laws of economics. There are laws of good government. And when a government ceases to honor those principles and study political science to the end of good government, and instead uses government for personal gain, private gain, self-interest, position, power, control, to protect, or maybe to take from Peter to pay Paul. These principles are not good principles of government. These are violations of the law of nature, and you go down the road a certain distance where you've turned government into a means of self-gain or personal ambition, then it's no wonder we end up in a place like we are here in the year 2013, wondering how we got here. So we need to understand principles of good government, good economics, that are consistent with the laws of nature and nature's God. And that's what this nation was founded on. And I should say is founded on. Because we don't want to say was founded on, suggesting that we have left that. If we say was founded on, that somewhere along the way we've redefined what America is founded on. America is founded on the laws of nature and nature's God. It's founded on the principle that there is a creator. It's founded on the principle that there is a God. It's founded on the principle that there's a higher law above government. Yes, government, there's a higher law above you. And even the government is subject to these higher principles. And so when a government ceases to function in accordance with those principles, it begins to move toward what we will call draconian. It will begin to enslave its people by the system of revenue and taxation, or taking from one and giving to another. And this is what is the cause of the destruction of every government throughout history. So why do I do what I do? One, to acquire standing. Two, as a basis, coming from a premise of freedom. Three, I'm withdrawing my consent to endorse a government that has come so far off the principles that we can no longer even recognize it compared to what the Founding Fathers had in mind. How many times have you heard, oh, the Founding Fathers are probably rolling over in their grave? Well, if that's the case, then that thought itself is a good indication that we're going down the wrong road, and we better make an about face. So, to send my silence when we should have object makes cowards of men. I don't know who to credit that. That wasn't my quote. Edmund Burke, maybe? So there is a time when we're required. As a matter of fact, the Declaration says we have a right to alter or abolish government, when it ceases to the function it was established to secure. And then, of course, when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object, offenses that are designed to reduce the people under absolute despotism, the principles of America require that we throw off that government. Because the greater power includes the lesser, everything up to including throwing off the government is a duty that is revested in the people. I say revested because some powers we gave away to the government through the Constitution. That's the whole point of the Constitution, was to delegate power. But when the government takes that power and abuses the power, or when the government begins to usurp power that is vested in the people that they didn't have, then they've overstepped their boundaries, and the people need to recognize the government has become relatively criminal based on the original intent of the founders and based upon what the powers delegated to the government were. So those are foundational principles that we all have to agree on before we can begin to know how to challenge the government, how to break what we believe may be an unconstitutional law, or following a principle that all of a sudden now the government passes a law that violates the principle. We've got to make a choice. Are we going to obey the law, or are we going to obey the principle and suffer the consequences of the law being exercised against us, and then having to stand in violation of the law while standing in principle? And I believe that I absolutely believe that this is what Christ was teaching, and I believe this is what Paul was teaching. You know, the Pharisees of his day, Christ rebuked these guys. He says, you guys travel over land and sea to make a convert. When you make a convert, you make him twice the son of hell as you. And he said, woe to you lawyers. You bind heavy loads upon men's shoulders, and you don't lift a little finger to help carry them. I believe that Christ was talking about the laws. He told the Pharisees, he said, you hypocrites, you sit in Moses' seat, but you don't do a thing he says. Moses, of course, was the lawgiver. So when we enter into a time when the government begins to exercise what we would consider law, because we got legislators up there passing laws like gun control, sorry folks, they don't have the power to do that. These are unconstitutional laws and therefore void. So if we get a system going where the people just summarily capitulate because we voted in a group of legislators who there happens to be a majority of one more, who was bought off by some special interest, or he was offered some position in the federal government if he voted this way on a bill, that doesn't make, just because there was a majority vote, that doesn't make it law. It has to be consistent with the principles of the Constitution, and it has to be, those principles have to be viewed through the principles of the law of nature, and nature's God. That's America. Now, if we don't like that, we can move to another country where those principles don't apply, but those principles do apply. And either we stand for those principles and suffer the consequences for standing, which means we might even have to go to jail, but it would give us standing to challenge what we would otherwise not be able to challenge. So those are some fundamental foundational principles. You're looking at me like we got to go to a break.
We got to go to a break. I'm listening to. It's hard for me to multitask, but we do have a break, and I want to continue with this conversation when we get back, because people are going, "What do we do? How do we get through this now?" You're answering that question. We'll be right back on the Red Barn Steakhouse, Montrose, Uray, and San Miguel Farm Bureau Drug Testing Incorporated Trading Floor. Welcome back, David Justice. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
You're welcome.
Let's go back to. I want to ask you a question. First of all, what prompted this conversation that we had in the first half was the fact that you don't have a driver's license, and you're fighting that point right now. We know that part. I think we understand that from what you were talking about in the first half. But what about voter ID? What about ID in particular? What are your thoughts?
Well, I have issues with the United States attempting to go universal ID. I have because the United States is supposed to be very limited in its power and jurisdiction and authority, and each state is technically and arguably sovereign. And the United States, wanting a universal ID, I believe, ultimately, like all governments, they enjoy power, and a universal ID would put the United States government into a status and capacity that it doesn't enjoy right now. And I think that there is a move for the United States to get this single ID, and I have issues with that. I like to keep that in the state, and I also, like we were talking about over the break, the idea that I can prove my citizenship and that I should be able to prove my citizenship and demonstrate it. I think that
For the purpose of
voting, for anything, for the purpose of, well, just voting, since that's the subject.
Okay.
I got in on an airplane. Check this out. I never told this story. It was right after the election. A friend of mine wanted me to go to Vegas with him, so he bought me a ticket. And I thought, well, this is a throwaway. I could care less about Vegas. I'm going to try an experiment. So I approached the TSA counter with armed with my a passport that was issued by a church and an electric bill. And I laid down my passport that was issued by a church and an electric bill. And the TSA agent said, well, this isn't ID. And I said, well, yes, it is. This is a church-issued document, and this is an electric bill. He says, do you have anything else? I pulled out a voter registration. He says, well, that's not ID. And I said, well, if that was good enough to vote last week, it should be good enough to get on an airplane.
And
he called over his supervisor, who asked me 3 times, where's my ID? And I said, this is my ID. It was good enough to vote. It's good enough to get on an airplane. He called his supervisor over, same thing. And then they gave me an authorization number, and I went on through. So I got on without any photo ID. I thought coming back might be a little more difficult. It was actually easier. Only this time I pulled out, they asked me if I had a Sam's Club card, which I don't. But on the way back, same thing. I pulled out an electric bill and a voter registration, and 3 times I was confronted. Each time, 3 questions: where's your ID, where's your ID, where's your ID? And eventually they let me on the airplane, but I refused to go through the naked body scanner. And now they're pulling them out, not because of what I did, I'm sure.
Sam's Club card, huh? Okay, here, I'm going to throw one out here. And ID for welfare recipients. I want to take it down that road.
I'll use an example of my son. So this is a real-time example. So I put my feet where my belief systems are because, my life is an experiment. I figure my life is an exercise of liberty, and as dark as things appear to be getting, I figure, let's try some out-of-the-box thinking. My son doesn't have a Social Security number. He's 21. He's in his 2nd year of college. Every time he comes up against that, you can't do this without one barrier, he blows right through it. Social Security is voluntary. Social Security is an entitlement. It's a benefit. Okay, you can't get that benefit unless you have proof of your citizenship, and that proof is the state-issued birth certificate that you need in order to get Social Security. Although the illegal aliens have figured out a way. Did you want to get that guy?
I'm fascinated. Welcome to the Trading Post. You're live on the air.
Hey, Jim, it's Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
All the Sam's Club card memberships all have pictures on the back of them now. They take your picture of them.
Oh, okay. So it's just handier then, huh?
Yeah, that's what they're trying to get to either way.
Okay. Can you get into Sam's Club without a card?
You can't get out. That is for sure.
Okay, you're just stuck there, huh?
Stuck there.
All right. Thanks, Leslie.
Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If everybody agreed with everybody, it would be a really boring world. And we're not ever going to agree. It's only by conflict can we come into a resolution. And if we enter into it intellectually honest, can we come out with a more truthful answer to our question. But we have to come in, and you're right, we can't diminish or dismiss the other side of the conversation, but they might have some good points we should be listening to.
Yeah. Exactly.
But we do need to build on a foundation always. Jesus talked about building a house on sand. It's not going to withstand the wind and the waves. So we really have to find a foundation that we agree on, and how we interpret that foundation. We have to agree on that. So without that common denominator, we're not going to get anywhere.
Welcome to Trading Post. You're live on the air.
Morning, Jim.
Good morning.
I guess I need to wish you a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
According to the biblical calendar, the new moon brought in the new biblical God's New Year.
Excellent.
And you're talking about laws. God's laws is Torah. And most of the people have voted against this. They got their own laws nowadays. But the governor of the universe, God, that's his laws. I'm sure David is familiar with this.
Excellent point. I'm glad you
And
brought this up.
every time we get away from God's laws, we go down the tubes. I feel like in this new year, 4 of us will get back with the God that's saying yesterday, today, and forever. Anyhow, Happy New Year, Jim and Dave.
Thanks.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Great call.
Yeah, and that goes back to the foundation again. You know, if we just buy into this notion that there is no truth and everything is relative, we're agreeing that we're all just perception-oriented people, and it's a battle of perceptions, and there is no reality. And when we get locked up in that, that's a delusion. That is a delusional thinking. And if we actually agree with that and buy into it, that there is no reality, there is only perception, then we are absolutely lost.
We don't want to sacrifice, though. We don't want to sacrifice.
Well, sacrifice is critical.
How far do you get pushed before you have to sacrifice?
Well, it depends on how much integrity are you standing.
What is one man sacrifices is that another man sacrifices. You know exactly what I'm getting at here. The point is that some of this stuff you're talking about is pretty foreign to us, and we have to make a decision as to whether we're going to go down that road or not, and suffer the sacrifice that we have to make out of our time, out of our wallets, or whatever to do that.
Well, you know, I think the idea of sacrifice should be measured against the integrity that we're walking in. You know, a whistleblower is standing in integrity, which is why he's blowing the whistle, but he's sacrificing something. But his integrity is mandating that he blows the whistle because he can't live with himself. So what came first, the sacrifice or the integrity?
So not having a driver's license, or refusing to have one, or challenging a unconstitutional law, whatever you want to call it, is going to require sacrifice.
Yeah.
Whether it be time or money or whatever.
It is painful, and it's been very expensive.
Standing, if that's what people are interested in. So there's our road.
So there's a lot going on underneath the appearance of rebellion. There's a lot going on under that. And to judge a matter before you hear it, according to Scripture, that makes you a fool. So anyone that would judge a matter before hearing the matter, they're foolish. They're dismissing listening to what they need to hear in order to make a better determination of what they're hearing.
Part 2 of this conversation next week. I'm sorry we're out of time.
Well, we'll just keep going until we get her done.
All right. Thanks, David Justice.
Thank you, Jim.
God bless you all. Take care. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.